We are recording this for our friends who are not able to attend live so that we can go ahead and share this out for folks who aren't able to be here in real time. Dr. Kate Aceta is with us, and she will be sharing about Ready Schools, Not Ready Children, Rethinking Early Education. So with that, Kate, I'm just going to let you take over.
Outstanding. My name is Dr. Kate Aceta. I am an assistant professor in many locations, technically. And in this capacity, I am getting ready to talk to you a little bit about Ready Schools, Not Ready Children. And I hope that this is interactive. So please, please, please do not hold your questions until the end. You can unmute. Please, please, please interact. Just we'll do a brief overview of sort of what we're hoping to do in the next hour together. I will be giving a little bit of background about me. I think context matters, where we've come from, our lived experiences, what we've taught, what we've seen that sort of shapes how we move through the world and how we think about it. If you're dropping in the chat about you, that works awesome. And then we're going to talk about our current paradigm, sort of the way we view education in the United States. I'll be really clear, I'm not talking about South Carolina specific. I'll give some details from there, but I'm really thinking about school readiness and culture from a sort of US perspective. So we're thinking about everybody. And hopefully you'll be able to find those connections to yourself, to your program, and the children and families that you have the honor of serving. A paradigm shift. So where we are now to where I'm sort of opening up the conversation to think about where we should be moving towards as an early childhood field. And I'm basing my wonderies and my thoughts around some really good research that was done in the 90s that sort of says, here's what we maybe should have been doing, and we've maybe lost our way a little bit. And then the conclusion, it says Q&A, but Q&A all the way through, please. I really mean that. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. About me. Oh, look at me. I look so young and living in South Carolina still when that photo was taken. So again, my name is Dr. Kate Aceta. I have over 10 years working in early childhood. In particular, I was a preschool special ed teacher in a therapeutic nursery for over a decade in Spanish Harlem in the South Bronx in New York. And I had the pleasure of working with kids from all ranges and background skills. All of the young children that I worked with had an identified disability and received special education services. In addition, I then was a Head Start teacher and director when I relocated to Oregon for a couple of years. I did my master's at Bank Street College of Education in Manhattan. I did my PhD at the University of Oregon. So if you can see, I've sort of moved around quite a bit. I've seen educational settings all over the country, and I've had the pleasure and honor of working with early childhood educators all over the United States. And then I had an outstanding time working with very closely with actually several of these blue boxed Skippy folks for the last, I guess, 9 years. This was our ninth year together. And I was at the University of South Carolina for 8 years as an assistant professor of early childhood special education. I ran their dual cert program and had the genuine pleasure and honor to work alongside Skippy for the last 9 years in a variety of capacities. Most recently, I'm a consultant. And then the last bit and my sort of, I guess, current location for right now is the UConn University Center for Excellence in Disabilities. All you need to know about all those letters and all those words is that I work on a couple national projects with faculty and also state level projects in Connecticut around increasing developmental screeners and the use of developmentally appropriate practices in the state of Connecticut as well as nationally. So I work primarily with adults. I think a lot about adults. And Dana, sorry, you heard this morning at the Seed Academy, but I'm going to say it again. It's about the adults in the room. And when we can finally all get on that same page, that the problems we see in classrooms are not kid level problems, they're adults needing supports. I said this morning and when I had the pleasure of starting off our sixth question mark Seed Academy. We we're talking this morning, and again, I was in another conversation with another group of really lovely folks, and it dawned on me that a referral for special education is a call for help from an adult. That's really an adult saying, it's not working and I don't know what to do. And this whole presentation is really about shifting perspectives and taking ownership over our own classrooms and our own educational systems of what we want to see in our education. What's the kind of education we want for the young children and families in our communities? So that's what we'll be talking about. So I had geographic location, but y'all are in South Carolina. So I know you're just generally in that state floating around having a good time. I'll actually be down there on the 13th, come down to Greenville for a couple days. So if you live in that area and you see me floating around on the streets, please come and say hi. I'd love to see you. I won't find it weird. I've had people at airports come up and say hello to me because they saw a YouTube video I did 4 years ago. That was pretty weird, but I really appreciated it. So don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. All right, so we got some preschool teachers. We've got early learning director. We've got a director of another early learning center. Oh, they let some riffraff in here. This Carrie Weichel from the Pyramid Model. No, I'm just kidding. And it's good to see you, Carrie. And I see lots of fabulous folks, all different kinds of programs. Oh, the Behavior Alliance. Hello, Karen. How are you? We see some other directors. Fabulous. So I couldn't be more pleased. Look, I'm always happy to see. Oh, Ori, we just met with some of your great Ori folks this morning. So, oh, fabulous. Welcome, Nicole. So I'm I'm always happy to see teachers and educators here, but I love to see admin because the work for changing schools shouldn't fall on the backs of teachers. We need administrative support and we need leadership to take ownership over this. And so I'm glad you're here so you can listen and reflect and take this time while you're eating a sandwich or having a lovely salad and to be able to do that together. So let me move you over. Like maybe I can put you at the top. Can I do that? No, I hated that. What did that just do? Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing?
I see your slides.
Oh, okay.
They
Hold
disappear.
on. I'm sorry. I'm my apologies. I lost you. There we go. That's better. Okay. I couldn't all see all your faces and it was covering up my words. All right. So we can think of a paradigm as for maybe if you're less familiar with that terminology as a map. It's sort of a way of thinking. So our current paradigm is sort of where we stand. What are we or how are we thinking about? And the topic we're talking about today is school readiness. So I want to put this in perspective. I know most of you are too young to have been around and working in 1991. But in 1991, the National Education Goals Panel put out a really beautiful article and sort of guidance and policy that by 2000, all children will enter school ready to learn. I want to emphasize that last part, not reading, not knowing all their addition, subtraction, not being able to write, ready to learn. So in 1991, that was the goal. And this was a massive panel. I really recommend taking a look at and if you go to the Gale article here that I have cited down in the tiny little corner, if you go down to that article and you read that, it sort of walks you through this process. Then in 1991, we come out and we say, this is what we want. We're pointing, if you've ever had the pleasure of doing a mission and vision statement with an organization that you work for, this is part of your values. This is your mission. Our mission is that by 2000, all children will enter school ready to learn. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but if you've been in a classroom or a school lately, it's 2026 and we ain't there. So we're not ready. Not all children are ready to learn. That's the emphasis there, to learn. And we're going to talk about what that really means in a minute. In 2007, we had the Improving Head Start Act. So that came out, and we're like, we're going to get Head Start. We're going to really like beef it up a little bit. They hadn't looked at it in a while, probably 20, 30 years prior to that. There had been some revisions to the Head Start Act. And they were really looking to sort of beef up and strengthen the quality. This is when we start to see the beginnings of class and different in class and different assessment tools being utilized. We see more guidance and structure around the terminology used for Head Starts. So, okay, cool. Then in 2015, so now we're 15 years into this by 2000, we have Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And really, no matter how you feel about this particular act, the general gist was all students will be successful in their academics. And in particular, they're going to graduate high school. Everybody's going to be reading by third grade. It's going to be great. This is sort of where we're pointing to this again and again. But here's the rub. There's not a whole lot of money attached to any of these things. And there wasn't a lot of practical guidance on what that would actually look like for schools and programs. Another one of those policies great on paper, but what's the practicality of the day to day? What do we need to physically do? What do we need to actually instruct in early learning programs so that all children enter ready to learn? And that's for kindergarten. I want to be really clear. Their national education goals in 1991 were for kindergarten, not 3K, not 4K, kinder. So again, sort of keeping that in perspective there. Again, feel free to jump in, questions, comments, don't hesitate. Otherwise, I'm going to sort of keep at my flowy pace. Okay. Oh, I gotta oh, geez, hold on. Whoops. Sorry, everybody. Where's my little box to keep me moving? There's too many things. I need 1,000 more screens. Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. So now let's take a look at our current paradigm. This is where we were. So again, oh, I'm like flying through. So we're here. Let's also but let's really talk about school readiness and practice. Schools have and programs have become almost obsessed with school readiness. To a point where, oh, why does that keep clicking? I'm so sorry, everybody. It's like I've never used this before. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna stop touching everything. Um, so the current paradigm really looks at school readiness, but what is this in practice? This is where if you were to Google Head Start, go to any division for early learning, any school district, any private program for early childhood, there is some language about school readiness. School readiness. We keep talking about all those ready schools, right? We got to be ready. We got to be ready. We got to be ready, right? So we've got to be ready with the schools. And that's great, but the problem is the onus, and this is what we're going to get to talk about next, the onus is really on the families. A lot of these talk about what needs to happen, and the onus falls on the families being ready. In this current paradigm, the discussion around ready for school is that one of the sort of major misconceptions is that learning happens only at school. Thus, the onus, so that's where, oh, we got to get all the little kids in school so they can learn and be ready. as opposed to all of the environmental opportunities that young children birth to five have to learn in their everyday environments. This is where we have a lot as educators to learn from early interventionists and other folks who do such a great job of being able to provide these kinds of supports. My other favorite, number two, readiness is a specific condition within each child, as if there is some magical quota that if we could just check off all these things, then they are ready. And I'll give an example of something that personally I had some stress around. I have a 3-year-old. Some of you may or may not know that. And he was not potty trained yet, but we're sending him to a public 3K starting in August, in September, and he needs to be potty independent. We were stressing. Now he's surprised he nailed it. But anyway, he's doing great now. But that's a great example of like, why is that considered a readiness skill to be fully independent in the toilet? Most of them can't wipe their little butts because their arms are too short. They're like T-Rexes. So there's going to need to be some sort of guidance or support. Readiness is not a specific condition within each child. There's not something that they need to do to be ready. They need to show up, and then we need to be ready for them. Another common misconception when we look at policies, programs, trainings related to school readiness is that readiness can be measured easily. If it could, we would all use the same readiness measurement tool. But honey, I haven't found one. It's not out there because there is no specific readiness that means they are ready for kindergarten. It is why states have done the OKRA, the RA, there's like 1,000 kindergarten readiness things, and they're never quite right. Because there is no true readiness that you can easily measure in a young child, especially when you think about all the confounding factors when you're doing assessments of young children. They lock up, they freeze, they're shy. You're doing it in a random location with a random human. Why on earth would they be telling you what color that is or the numbers? They don't even know you. So when we think about these, there really is no easy sort of measurement for readiness. Readiness is mostly a function of time. It is not time that gives readiness, it is opportunity and access. Children need opportunity and access to learning environments that foster skills and give them opportunities to engage. Another example I use all the time. You go to do a screener with a little human, and it's like, do they use scissors? And you say, and the family member says, no. Probably because if they were like my house, I'm worried about hair getting cut. So I'm not just giving my 3-year-old scissors, or I'm certainly not giving my 2-year-old scissors unattended or unsupervised. But that doesn't mean he's not ready to use a scissor. It also doesn't mean he doesn't know how to use scissors. It means he hasn't had opportunity and access to scissors to learn to cut. So again, opportunity and access is not the same thing as readiness. Whew, okay. This is going to ruffle some feathers, but I'm here to ruffle everybody. Children are ready to learn when they can sit quietly at a desk and listen. No, ma'am. That is not kindergarten. I don't know if you all remember kindergarten. My kindergarten was half day. And I'm going to say this a lot. I'm going to make some references to the current paradigm and then the way things used to be. And look, nothing was perfect back then. We've made some great improvements in education in many ways. But when we say kids are so different nowadays, I also want us to remember how many of us went to childcare outside of the home from 8 to 4. I mean, really think about that. How many of you went to childcare, were in childcare starting at around 9 to 12 months from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.? I'm guessing you weren't. So what does that, and that's not a bad thing. That's a reality of their sort of socioeconomics that needs to occur in our current situation. But little humans haven't changed developmentally. The context around them has. And yet we have antiquated and disproportionate expectations for young children in our society around what they should be ready to do or what readiness looks like. And so I would keep that in mind. Children who are not ready do not belong in school. I think we all know where I kind of stand on that one. And again, these aren't me. I didn't make these up. I wish I did. I would be way smarter than Gail et al. And Weller and Brenda Camp. But these are from 1990 and 2019. Many of these are from Willer and Brenda Camp's work in 1990. So these are not new concepts, but they're still very relevant 36 years later. I almost said 20, and then I realized that's not true. So 36 years later. Okay. So I'd like us to consider how we would refine school readiness. This was in the original National Education Goals Panel from 1991. It's summarized in this article, the Gales et al. Article from 2019 from American Pediatric Society. Association. And it's a three-pronged approach that school readiness was always originally intended to be conceptualized in three ways. The readiness of the child, so development, skills, and knowledge, a sort of trifecta of those things. School's readiness, so is the learning environment ready? And then family and community. And you will note that in these, they do not talk about shaming and blaming parents, but rather, does the family have access to regular and consistent and affordable medical coverage? Do they have access consistently to nutritional food? And do they have access to childcare if they need it? So again, we really want to think about this was a three-pronged approach. And I say I'm refining school readiness, but that makes me sound more important than I really am. I just read a bunch of things and had some thoughts with some other people smarter than me. And I thought, I think we need to talk more about this and go back to some of the things that were discussed in the early 90s around what school readiness really was intended to meet. Because what ended up happening is the middle section right here, I'm pointing to it, but you can't see it. It just looks like I'm waving around. The middle section, school readiness, that's fallen off. It really has. We end up having a bunch of programs where we're going to like get your kid ready. Now and then we've put the huge emphasis on the child being ready. And then by default, the family component there's been so much blame and shame about, is your child ready for kindergarten? I got to send them to an extra program. I got to get them to this summer thing. I got to do this. What if they can't? What if they can't? And there's a lot of stress. I remember my oldest is in kindergarten right now. And we had moved to a new school district up here. And I was eagle-eyed. Oof, I was all over that. Welcome to the elementary school. And the principal walks in and she's calm and confident. She's just really lovely human. And she says almost immediately, "We are ready for your kid exactly as they are when they walk in." And I remember thinking, we need to hear that and really mean that every time a kid starts kindergarten. It is not on the child. You could see the weight, the tension relax in the parents' shoulders, knowing that they were walking into a school where their child was showing up exactly as they were supposed to. And she said, if they're not reading, that's our job. If you're worried about their numeracy, that's our job. If you're worried about their ability to like pay attention or, oh, Tina says no to that. um, if you're ready for if they're If they're working on social skills, that's our job. We're really there to partner with you. And I feel like what a message that gives when that's your beginning. And then if you add in a level of sort of like complexity or addition to that, if your child also has a diagnosed disability and has an IEP or a 504 going into the system, to be able to hear that message again and again, and then see it actually worked in reality is amazing. So fabulous. So let's talk about what we're going to do because you're like, okay, you're like living in the past. What are we doing? If you haven't guessed, I'm proposing a paradigm shift. We're going to shift our perspective. We're going to recenter things around schools' readiness. That is our anchor. Why? Because we can control the adults. Just kidding. No, we actually can't. But children need to show up just as they are, and the adults need the supports in order to feel competent and confident to do their job. And if you're in special education or early childhood, you've had incredibly high rates of turnover. Folks are not feeling supported in the ways that they should. Teachers are showing up and things feel harder. I would argue they are. We're seeing higher rates of behavioral referrals. I always joke, no kid gets a referral because they can't draw a triangle. It's usually because they've thrown a chair across the room. So, but we want to focus really on this sort of school's readiness. And what is that going to look like? And I'm going to go through all these today. And this is really focusing on a three-pronged approach related to the learning environment. One is the people. That's increasing their competence and confidence. Do they know more and do they feel like they can do it? Because knowing how to do something and feeling capable of doing it are two distinct things. And we want to make sure that they feel good about what they're getting ready to do. Second, materials. So, what are the curricula, the books, the physical materials, the manipulatives that are accessible? Arguably, less screens, less Chromebooks. I'm not going to get into this other than to say, I would argue that you read some of the legislation that's coming out in Tennessee, Utah, New Hampshire, Vermont, California, and I think maybe Idaho and maybe Wisconsin on a drastic reduction in the use of screens for educational purposes in elementary, middle, and high schools. So K-12 is looking, the pendulum is swinging back. It looks like there are movements across the country from parents, all parent driven, wanting less screen time in the classrooms. Also, if you look at the data, our test scores haven't gotten any better, folks, because you're looking at a Chromebook. So, if anything, they've gotten worse. So it's almost like you need human interaction to learn things. So when we think about that, I want to focus on that. Let's talk about curriculum. And then the physical space, like the actual, like the layout of the classroom. Where do the chairs go? Where's the table? What is sort of the physical flow of the room, the classroom design, and routines. What's expected? What are those daily classroom routines and rituals that we do every single day? Okay, okay. I just saw a chat. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you, Melissa, I think you made a comment. Any questions or comments? We're about halfway through, believe it or not. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So, how can we get ready? This is really thinking about as the adults. And for those of you who are classroom teachers, directors, administrators, I want you to take this and think about when your next academic year begins, how will you ready your staff for the students that are going to walk into your classroom? So we're going to talk about the people. And in particular, we're going to talk about increasing that confidence and competence, materials, making modifications and adaptations, UDL, universal design for learning, and then schedules and routines, those transitions and expectations. Those are the things we can sort of really focus on. Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. Okay, just double checking my slides. that I had all the things that I thought I had in there. I do. Good. So again, the people part, and then we'll also get sort of into the nitty gritty of sort of what does this actually look like in the classroom, and you can think about sort of from a practical planning perspective, what this might look like. All right. So when we think about people, we want to think about staff confidence and competence. And these are sort of like the big pillars that we want to think about when we're thinking about instruction. And not just instruction, but training. So, do the adults in the room have a strong foundation in child development? Really understanding developmental expectations. Have you dusted off your ASQs recently or any other developmental screener? What kind of developmental monitoring do you use? Think about as you're getting ready for your next academic year, when was the last time we trained our staff on how to do this? Do they understand and do they feel confident in talking with families about results from these developmental screeners? And then from a play perspective and sort of like um, natural experiences, little kids want to play. This is how they engage in their world. So if you are an adult human who plays less, what trainings, coaching, and support do you need to foster and develop play skills in young children? Not handwriting. That's not what I said, just in case you got that confused. Play skills, the ability to get their little dino characters all together in a little family and have some sort of narrative. What using magnet tiles to build and build, not just build and break and build and break, but to move beyond that in a developmental sequence. What supports and trainings do the people need, the adults need to foster play? Not sitting at a table. I remember I walked into an early childhood center and the adults in the room, lovely humans, the adults in the room said to me, look at them, they just like do it all on their own. And I said, that's great, but do they all just do the same thing every day? Like, have you had conversations with them about their play? Have you extended it to include and focus on IEP goals throughout the day? How are you engaging in the play with them? And I don't mean you need to be their playmate because that's what the other kids are for. But how do you foster play and interactions between children in the classroom and develop those social skills so that they are ready to, in first grade, work on a team to finish a writing project? Those play skills in building with blocks on navigating social interactions leads to increased social and academic engagement later on because they know how to build those relationships and play with others nicely. High quality instructional strategies. I could go on and on and on and on, but I don't need to because you know now that you should reach out to Carrie and Melissa and Dana and Joe and Heather and Carrie Weichel and anyone else from the Skippy franchise and say, reach out to them if this is what you're looking for around increasing the use of high quality instructional strategies. How are you planning out your instruction to maximize? I remember I went in to do a reading, an observation of an undergrad, she was a master's student. And she was reading Brown Bear, Brown Bear. And it's a Head Start class, threes and fours. She's reading it, and her only questions are what color are the animals? And the kids are nailing it. Blue horse, purple cat, red duck. No, just kidding, it's yellow duck. I knew that. And she's going through, and at the end of the lesson, we go over to the side and I say, can you tell me more about why you picked those questions? She said, well, because the book is about colors. And I said, I get that, but every kid nailed that question. There was nobody in there who was floundering on that was a blue horse or a white dog. They all knew that. If your kid already immediately knows the answer to a question, the question's too easy and you need to deepen their level of thinking. So pick books that are more engaging and more challenging and developmentally appropriate. But you don't know how to do that if you're struggling with identifying instructional strategies. If you ask a kid, what is this? And they don't respond, and you ask 7 more times and they still don't respond, you haven't taught them that it's a pen. You've just asked the same question all over and over again. That's not teaching, that's badgering the witness. What you want to do is then man model. Oh, what's that? Wait. It's a pen, a pen. Boom. That's instruction. And so do your staff need additional training and supports related to high quality instructional strategies? And then we want to be proactive and responsive to individual family differences, whether they're linguistic, cultural, just like they live with grandma only. There's all sorts of family differences, and to be proactive and responsive to that, to really think about and get to know the children that are in our classrooms and their families. So, what are those strategies we're going to use in the beginning of the year before school starts to be able to do that? So many programs used to do home visits. We don't do that as much anymore, but what a difference it would make if we could spend 20 minutes with each family before the start of the school year to really get to know them a little bit. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say, when we're talking about increasing staff confidence and competence, which is an emphasis on social emotional skills. It's really those universal supports. Are we screening, and then are we providing instruction? Are we building that emotional connection with young children? I could go on and on and on about that sort of universal supports that we want to think about. Yes, screening is critical. We need to sort of get a snapshot of sort of where kids are developmentally, but we want to create environments where children take risks, where they feel safe, where they want to learn. Nobody takes a risk if they don't feel safe. And we need to create those environments where they feel like they belong, they're a part of the group. And really, most of early learning should be about being a part of a group. How to not be, as my kids say, a butt. Don't be a butt. How do you reduce that throughout the day? Everyone's going to be a butt sometimes, but try not to be. So, how do you foster that in kids to be able to, and even really young little kids, 2 year olds, one year olds, how do you foster that sense of belonging and engagement so that they feel like a part of the group? You want those kids to run out the door every day to want to go to early learning. Kindergarten should be the place that they show up ready and excited, because the pattern of experiences they have had has been warm and nurturing. So we really want to think about that. Well, let me check. I see blips in the chat. Oh, you dropped those in. Okay, great. Just like seamless, shameless plugs for everybody. Okay, so again, I could probably do a whole nother webinar really just on these particular increasing staff confidence and competence, but I don't need to, because you can have other Skippy humans that know this inside and out and can really tailor the kinds of supports that you might be looking for your program. What are the ages of your kids? And then more importantly, what does your staff need? When was the last time you asked them what trainings they need? What would help them feel more confident and competent to be able to do their job? Okay. Again, people, we got resources here. They dropped two in the chat for you. Double check DEC and CPMI for the pyramid model training materials, and NAUIC for resources, the power of the profession. Take a look at those developmentally appropriate practices and other great resources there. I know every one of these humans who works for Skippy can direct you to those, and share with you what anything else you might need related to those particular topics. Great. We'd love to connect with you. Okay, perfect. Just making sure I'm not missing anything. Sometimes I get a little lost. And then, okay. Oh, where did that go? Oh, go back. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, now I know why. Because I was focusing mostly on the people, because I didn't know if I was going to have enough time, which is good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this last one, schedules and routines. So there's a whole beautiful series on looking at the building blocks. Dana and I were just talking about this morning. around trainings related to adapting and modifying curricula and materials. So I'm not going to say too much about that, except that you should email Dana and Joe around some trainings related to that when we want to think about, so you have materials in your classroom. And I want to be really clear, I am not promoting a particular curriculum. Less is more. Stop buying boxed curriculum, please. What a waste of money. Buy materials for your classrooms. Buy more puffballs and glue and buy less boxed curricula. Trust that your competent and confident staff can develop materials and curriculum each week and lessons each week based on the humans in front of them. There are three. I'm not going to mention penguins, but those of you who know, don't talk about penguins in preschool. We don't live in Antarctica and we don't live in places where penguins are. Talk about squirrels and alligators, because that's what lives down in South Carolina, and a lot of too many water snakes, in my personal opinion. So talk about the things that are relevant to your children and families, and make sure that when you're thinking about curriculum, don't pause as the director. Do you need to go out and buy another curriculum? Or should we spend that money training our staff in how to design lesson plans based on the kids that are sitting in front of them? If you're down the street from a Publix, or you're down the street from a Dollar General, have you had a lesson on going to the store and shopping? Have you had a lesson on going to the public library? What are the resources that are available in your own community and how can you make those? So again, we can talk about materials and things another day. Physical environment, when we take a look at that, that's universal design for learning. That is a whole nother host and animal that's sort of too much for one particular 1 hour webinar that I don't want to overdo that. Again, another area where I would reach out to Melissa, Dana, and Carrie to take a look at how to increase the universal design for learning based on that. Is there a chat? Did I miss it? Okay, no. Okay, great. Perfect. And then the last piece I just sort of want to touch on here are schedules and routines. And again, I feel like you're like, enough with the other people. I get it, they're great, but they really are great humans. And when you're looking at schedules and routines and how you can get ready, take this summer to plan and remember that the kids that walk into your classroom in this next academic or the next start of the year are not the same kids that you had in May and June. They are new. They have lived something else, and you will need to go over those behavioral classroom expectations all over again. And you will for weeks, likely about 3 to 4 weeks. And then they're going to kind of get it underneath their belt. And even then, you'll probably need to remind them every time and every day. Because why? They're little humans. We can't be expected them to remember. So that's our job. Our job is to remind and be kind and give grace and space to little humans that have only been doing this for anywhere between, 12 to 36 months. I don't know if you've ever done a job for that long, but you're not always that great 3 years in. You still have a lot to learn, and so do they. So when you're thinking about schedules and routines, you can think about those transitions and expectations. Do the staff feel confident and competent in how to plan transitions? A great example, I thought about this the other day. I was in a Head Start class a couple of years ago. And I was looking at their schedules and they were like, we're really struggling with this time of day. And they came from outside and they brought them to the rug. And then from the rug, they called them one by one to wash the hands, to then dry the hands, to then go to the little tables. And they said, it's like so chaotic. And I said, well, yeah, because they're going to like 30 locations. I'm not surprised that this is sort of like a sticky point for these 3 and 4 year olds. They're coming in from outside to like a buzz. And so we really sort of did a lot of planning on how to reduce the number of location stops before they got to the table. And it was as simple as getting it approved that they could use hand sanitizer as they stood at the door and walked them in one by one. Little pump, little rinse, and they sat at the table and snack was ready for them. Really made a huge difference in the transition there to be able to help them. Transitions don't need to be complicated, they just need to be purposeful and reduced. How can you engage learning and engage little kids during those transitions to do that? And then again, behavioral expectations and just sort of general expectations of the day. If you have a visual schedule, do you use it? Do you refer to it daily, every day, as you move from activity to activity, helping them feel grounded in their day? Even if they're smiling all day, my guess is that 4-year-old is wondering when their day is going to be done. Even the kid that's having the best day, they're often thinking, when am I going to get to go home and see my grown-ups? When is this done? I mean, who amongst us does not like an agenda? We like to know what's coming so we know when it's going to be over, even when we enjoy it. Two things can be true. We can enjoy it, but also knowing that there's a sequence and structure is so helpful. All right. Oh, I finished early. What are the odds? I didn't expect that. I'd love to hear from people and have a discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my slides because I'd like to see all your faces if that's okay with everybody.